It's either bad advice or advice that's not in the client's best interest. So if you die with a large amount of money in your RRIF, that's entirely taxable as income if you're the last surviving spouse. That's a huge tax hit to your estate. Why didn't that money come out earlier in your 60s or 70s or 80s?
Welcome back to Steadyhand's Coffee Break series. And Steve, welcome back to you too.
Happy to be here, David.
Now today, Steve and I are shining a light on something that's rarely talked about, but incredibly important to your financial health. And that's what happens when advice isn't necessarily in your best interests. Steve, we received some great feedback on the 3-part series on switching from savings to spending that you and I did over the past few months. And we've detailed the practical and behavioral challenges of going from accumulating your wealth to spending it. And links to those videos are provided in the notes below. But additionally, I recently received an email from a Steadyhand client that I thought needed to be discussed publicly. So let me read out part of what they wrote. Quote, some advisors don't raise the question of withdrawals because it's to their advantage not to. I assume this is because the advisor is paid based on the amount of money invested. My sister-in-law faced this and eventually switched to Steadyhand. But her previous advisor discouraged withdrawals, and at one point she was even using a line of credit to cover her expenses, even though she had enough savings to do so. Now, that same client went on to describe some experiences they had themselves that included being sold a range of investment products, but all had cancellation fees. And they summed it up by saying it made switching feel impossible. Now, that's not just bad advice. It's advice shaped by, incentives. And these incentives are really related to how people are getting paid. Steve, you're an advice-only planner with Money Coaches Canada. Now, you don't manage money, sell products, or earn fees or commissions based on the size of a client's portfolio. Well, what do you make of all of these shenanigans that the client is referring to?
Glad you asked, David. And in my preparation for our talk today, I gave this some thought. And first of all, it's shocking and disappointing and borders on egregious, the example that you give. And it got me thinking that there are two things that impact our lives, whether we pay attention to them or not. And that's our money and our health. So much better to pay a little bit of attention to, well, ideally, both of those things that will increase our quality of life. For example, if I'm paying 2.5% on my mutual fund fees, which is almost the average that people pay in Canada, by the way, that means I'm paying $1,000, $10,000, maybe $50,000 a year compounded over 10 or 20 years. It means I'm working possibly 5 or 8 years longer just to cover the cost and the compounding effect of those fees. I'm not willing to work 5 or 8 years longer for anybody.
So in your practice, what are some of the most common conflicts that you see playing out with your clients as you do financial planning?
The two most common, I would say, are waiting until 72 to start converting or to convert a RRIF to an RRSP to a RRIF, or waiting until age 71 to convert an RRSP to a RRIF and starting to take the money out when you're 72. And the second one, which is somewhat related to that or can be related to that, is getting advised to start Canada Pension Plan at age 60. So as we discussed in our previous videos, you don't have to wait till 71 to convert an RRSP or part of an RRSP to a RRIF. You can do it anytime. You can do it in your 50s if you want. And often when you first retire, you're in quite a low tax bracket. It's a great opportunity to get money out of the RRSP or RRIF. But this can be in direct competition with advisor commissions, unfortunately. So a lot of them don't advise their clients take it until 72. This can be a real missed opportunity. And dovetailing with that, I often hear people say, I don't like RSPs or RRIFs because when my parent passed away, they had a huge tax bill. And this person was in their 90s, and I think, well, why wasn't that money being withdrawn earlier? It's either bad advice or advice that's not in the client's best interest. So if you die with a large amount of money in your RRIF, that's entirely taxable as income if you're the last surviving spouse. That's a huge tax hit to your estate. Why didn't that money come out earlier in your 60s or 70s or 80s? Like just taking a little bit out every year. That's why working with a professional like someone at Steadyhand or an advice-only planner can save you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. The second example is those early Canada Pension Plan or that advice on taking Canada Pension Plan early. That means that you don't have to take as much from your investments, which helps your commission-based advisor. And very, very important for me to say, I'm not painting every advisor with the same brush. A lot of advisors, especially the folks at Steadyhand who truly are client first, would never advise that. But if your advisor is telling you to take Canada Pension Plan at age 60, you better be asking why. Like, do you have a very short life expectancy? Do you have no other money? Why not start to take money out of those RSPs or RRIFs earlier when you're at the lowest tax bracket you'll be the rest of your life? Often, this is what I'm advising my clients to do because financially, it makes the most sense.
In my experience, there's a lot of clients, Canadians, who are invested in products that could range from high fee mutual funds to locked in GICs. And when you ask, well, why are you invested in this? It's invariably the response is, well, because the advisor recommended it. And then you begin to realize that there's a lot of sales targets and quotas and incentives that are taking place in the financial services community. And I know CBC Marketplace a number of years ago used an undercover camera and discovered employees at all of the major banks caught on camera upselling products just to hit quotas. Have you had any personal experience with your clients in that vein?
Well, I can give you even more personal story. When I was starting in the industry, I talked to many different companies, and probably 80% of them mentioned sales quotas and how I'd be paid on these commissions, and it did not personally sit well with me, which is why I chose advice-only planning. But that it's 100% pervasive through a lot of the industry, which makes it very hard for people to get advice that's in their best interest. And if you don't know what you're paying in fees, ask what you're paying in total fees in percentage and dollar terms. I know Steadyhand's very clear about that. It's one of the reasons you're a trusted partner of Money Coaches Canada. But when I get my clients who aren't with Steadyhand to ask these questions, they feel uncomfortable, or they often don't get a straight answer. And if someone can't tell you how much you're paying them, you're probably with the wrong person.
And if you've ever received advice that made you feel trapped or wondered if your advisor had a hidden agenda, I can assure you, you're not alone. Unfortunately, regulators are slowly shining a light on these practices, but the progress is slow. And it's partly because the issues are both complex and partly because the traditional financial industry, the banks and the insurance companies, are powerful lobbyists. For one small step forward is coming at the end of this year. Effective January 2026, investment firms will finally be required to show Canadian investors the total cost of investing. Like Steve just said, sounds pretty basic, right? But this kind of transparency has been a long time coming. So in the meantime, there are better options. There are planners like Steve and Money Coaches Canada and other advice-only financial planners who are truly on your side. And whether you work with Steadyhand, an advice-only planner, or someone else entirely, just make sure that that advice that you're getting is built around your interests and not theirs. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Steve.